Hello and welcome to another session of Groundbreakers Live. I'm your host Javed Mohammed and I'm very honored to have with us Hans Viehmann, who is the product manager for Oracle Spatial and Graph Technologies. Hans, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
So Hans, I'm going to be giving a presentation at the EMEA, Oracle Groundbreakers EMEA tour, making sense of location, tracking and visualizing, analyzing movement of people in a pandemic. That's quite a mouthful.
It is quite a mouthful, yes, and obviously it's a relatively hot topic at the moment. So the main idea, as you can guess from the title, is to look at identifying or how to identify encounters between people, so that in the event one person is actually infected, how can you find out all the other people this person has been in touch with, right? As I said, it's a hot topic at the moment with the pandemic going on. But if you think about it, it is actually also a very relevant topic in all sorts of other business domains and environments, right? In fact, I mean, we've built this functionality as part of a project in the Middle East, where it was really designed for tracking and tracing using a centralized system, but you could use it just as well for tracking of criminals and suspects, for example, or for monitoring movements of ships, where ships meet and potentially could hand over drugs or something. Or you could use it in monitoring wildlife, or all sorts of things. It's a relatively generic topic where location is important to figure out if two things happened close to each other at more or less the same time. So the underlying question of figuring out who or what has been close enough for long enough for something to happen, that's the key thing which we'll be looking at.
Okay, so you've listed quite a few different kind of use cases, and I'm just thinking of the very first one about the pandemic. I mean, this is obviously a global event. It's happening pretty much in every part of the world. Obviously, some parts have dealt with it a little better than others. But I'm just kind of, can you help to kind of just pass down, like from a technology standpoint, what are the different components that kind of help to make this come together?
So if you look at it from an Oracle perspective, really the only thing we would need in this context would be the database, because all of this kind of analytics on finding which person or which object has been close enough for long enough for something to happen, we would run down in the database. We cannot assume that the customer has a given infrastructure of some sort, so we depend on the information about who has been where at what time to end up in some data structure which we can deal with. So we are not getting into the business of we will provide the GPS devices that do the actual track and trace. It's also not our intention to provide badge swipe in, swipe out systems in buildings or the like, but we depend on that information being available in the database. And then what we offer is two pre-built APIs, which are automatic in the sense that they use what is there in the database and scalable, such that you can use huge amounts of data and run the analytics in the database. And these functions are actually going to be available in every edition of the database free of charge. In fact, they are already available now. It's only that they are not part of the standard kit yet. But if you have an 18C database, for example, if you have a 19C database, you just download a patch and you can run that. And in later versions, we'll have that pre-installed and ready to run.
Okay, so what I'm hearing you saying is that this is really an integral function of the database. I was kind of under the impression that you have the database and then Oracle Spatial and Graph Technology. That's something that's an app that runs
on top of it.
On top of it.
Well, there are bits and pieces which you can use on top of it, which are also part of the licensing bundle. So, for example, with our spatial features with the database, we offer a tool which is called Spatial Studio, which is geared towards the novice, to people who are not dealing with location-related data on a daily basis. And with that tool, you can start making sense of the data, meaning you can look at, for example, the positions of your tracking device over time on a map, or you can create analytics workflows using that tool, and then displaying the results on a map. So in that case, yes, or in that sense, there are tools and functionalities which are sitting on top of the database, which take over the visualization and which also allow you to create analytics workflows on the data, and then share the output with Oracle Analytics Cloud, for example, or pass it on to any other kind of application that understands GeoJSON, for instance, this kind of thing.
Okay, so just kind of pivoting off your main presentation. So this is obviously part of, as I mentioned in the opening, it's a part of the EMEA Groundbreakers tour, and obviously because of the current worldwide situation, this is happening virtually. That's why we're not having this conversation in person. I know we were talking a little bit off camera that you've had some other experiences. So I'm just kind of curious how you're finding this experience of presenting and participating, not only in Zoom, but I think you mentioned some other formats that are out there. So just talk to me about if I was live, I'd just kind of see what's the vibe you get of being in the conference. So I know it's a lot harder doing it virtually, but I'm just kind of interested to get your take on that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we all had to change the way we do our business. As you know, and we've met on a number of occasions, I've been speaking at various user events, Oracle conferences, and so forth. And so from one day to the other, I went down to 0 business travel. And I have to say, I do miss the personal interaction with folks. But on the other hand, it's been an opportunity also to try out different formats, try out new formats of interacting with customers, with partners, with prospects. And it allowed us, one of the interesting things from my perspective is the current situation allows us to interact more closely, even though we do this only virtually, with parts of the world which would otherwise not be covered as intensively as we do now. And the example I tend to use is we have a relatively strong spatial community down in South Africa. Mm-hmm. And doing things in a virtual way allows us to include our friends down in South Africa relatively easily. Same thing for Asia Pacific and so forth. So from that perspective, it's been an opportunity to better reach communities which otherwise we would have had a harder time to connect with or keep in touch with. But of course, it is not the same thing as doing things in person. And I was just testing a platform which the Spanish Oracle user group will be using for their annual user conference, which is effectively a virtual reality type of environment. So rather than just using Zoom, or I've also seen folks using Zoom in combination with Slack so that you have an opportunity, at least in the breaks, to interact with others and so on. They are taking the approach of a real virtual conference where you have an avatar moving around in a virtual environment to give you the opportunity to also personally interact with other participants to the conference, or even as a speaker, go up to the lectern, present, and so on. So give you more of an immersive type of feeling to the conference.
I think you mentioned off camera again, it's more kind of like a Second Life kind of an experience, although I've never quite participated in those kind of games, but it sounds fascinating.
I didn't do that either. It just came to me that, you know, there was this time many years ago, and even my younger daughter didn't recall Second Life as a concept at all. I've never tried it myself, but it is this kind of, you know, virtual environment type of experience which we try out here.
All right. Well, Hans, thank you so much for giving us your time and for sharing, and all the best with your presentation.
Thanks a lot. Talk to you soon, Javed.
Take care.